Think you know the Romans? Think again. The ancient Romans were more than just gladiators, emperors, and toga parties. The truth about their society might shock you. Here's 5 of the biggest myths that history has gotten completely wrong about ancient Rome. Some of these might challenge everything you thought you knew. Myth 1. Gladiators fought to the death in every battle. The image is iconic. 2 sweaty gladiators fighting in the arena until one lies dead, while the crowd roars in bloodthirsty approval. But what if I told you that most gladiatorial battles didn't end in death? Surprised? Well, here's the truth. Gladiators were highly valuable assets. They were skilled professionals, often trained for years, and not just expendable pawns. Killing one in every fight would have been a waste of resources. Sure, sometimes they did die, but the majority of battles ended with submission, not execution. The reality is that these warriors were closer to athletes than disposable combatants. They were celebrities with sponsorship deals and fan followings. In fact, losing a star gladiator could mean a massive financial hit for their owners. The stakes were high, but death wasn't always the goal. Still think every fight was a death match. Let's move on to the next myth. Myth 2. Romans were constantly at war. When you think of Rome, you probably picture armies marching across continents, conquering territory left and right. But here's the kicker. Rome wasn't always a war machine. Sure, the Roman Empire expanded through military campaigns, but daily life for most Romans was far from the battlefield. In fact, during the Pax Romana, or Roman peace, the empire enjoyed a period of relative tranquility that lasted for over 200 years. During this time, Rome's economy flourished, culture thrived, and people lived their lives in relative safety and comfort. Soldiers were still stationed across the empire, but many of them were more involved in building roads, managing logistics, and maintaining peace than fighting battles. In other words, while the Roman legions were powerful, they weren't always waging war. Shocked? Well, it's about to get even juicier. Myth 3. All Romans were wealthy and lavish. We often imagine ancient Rome as a place of decadent banquets, marble palaces, and flowing wine. But the reality for most Romans was far from luxurious. The majority of the population lived in modest apartments or even slums. These crowded, multi-story buildings, known as insulae, were the homes of the lower and middle classes. They weren't living in grandeur, they were struggling to make ends meet. The upper class, the aristocracy, was indeed wealthy, but they represented a small fraction of the population. Most Romans were ordinary citizens or slaves, working hard to survive. If you were a Roman baker, merchant, or farmer, life was about grinding through the day-to-day. No golden statues, no feasts with emperors, just the hustle to make a living. Still holding on to that vision of Roman luxury? Let's bust another myth. Myth 4. Rome fell overnight. Picture this. One day, the mighty Roman Empire stands tall, and the next, it crumbles into dust. That's how many people think of the fall of Rome. But the truth? The fall was a long, slow process that took centuries. Rome didn't collapse in one catastrophic moment. It deteriorated over time through political instability, economic troubles, and invasions from outside forces. The western half of the Roman Empire did eventually fall in 476 AD. But even then, Roman culture, law, and influence continued to shape Europe for centuries after. The Byzantine Empire, also known as the Eastern Roman Empire, survived for nearly 1,000 more years after the fall of the West. So the idea that Rome suddenly vanished is more of a dramatic story than a historical reality. The fall of Rome wasn't a one-night disaster. Ready for the last myth? It's a big one. Myth 5. Romans only spoke Latin. Latin is the language we all associate with ancient Rome. But did you know that many Romans didn't speak Latin at all? In the eastern provinces of the empire, Greek was far more commonly spoken. In fact, Greek was the language of education, literature, and philosophy. The educated elites in Rome often knew Greek, and many Roman emperors preferred speaking it. The historian Tacitus even complained that Latin was being neglected in favor of Greek. In the far reaches of the Roman Empire, other languages thrived as well. Aramaic, Coptic, and Punic were spoken in different regions, and the multicultural empire allowed many local languages to coexist. The idea of a purely Latin-speaking empire is a huge oversimplification. Rome was a melting pot of languages and cultures, making it a truly diverse society. Think Latin ruled the Roman world? Not so fast. So there you have it. 5 myths about ancient Rome that most people get wrong. The gladiators weren't always fighting to the death. Rome wasn't constantly at war, and most Romans weren't living in luxury. The fall of Rome was a long and complex process, and Latin wasn't the only language spoken within the empire. History has a funny way of getting distorted over time, but now you're armed with the truth. The next time someone brings up these ancient myths, you can set the record straight. Want more myth-busting videos? Don't forget to subscribe and hit that notification bell.